Joanne Farrell is a builder, industry leader and founder of Build Like a Girl. Her work champions women in construction and challenges the barriers that keep women out of trades. Today she joins us to talk about equity, workplace culture and why dignity matters everywhere, including on site. Welcome, Jo.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Super excited. Now, we always start our podcast with a would you rather question.
Okay.
Would you rather manage your period in a portable site toilet or in a crowded public bathroom?
Crowded public bathroom.
Oh, let's undig that. Why?
Because I've spent 30 years on construction sites having to deal with portaloos, and I would prefer not to have to go back and deal with them again. So, the portaloo experience has not been a good one.
Do they even fit a sanitary bin in them?
No. So there were no sanitary bins at any point in time when I was based on site as a tradie. It was just something that you wouldn't even suggest or bring up in conversation at all.
We need to get onto the portaloo manufacturers to work out how they can actually build it into the portaloo, right?
Yep. And even having proper little shelving where we can actually put products as well that aren't going to get knocked into the sinks or the toilet themselves.
Yeah.
So, there's a whole redesign sort of thing there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Same with the toilets in the planes, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think they're based on the same model almost.
Yeah, as small as you can get them.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you got into construction in the first place.
Was always a Lego kid. Loved building things with my hands. Mum said she'd try and give me Barbie dolls to play with and I'd throw them into my brother's room and take all his Lego. So we used to fight a lot. I was always interested when we drove past construction sites, seeing all of these people crawling around and these sites going from a pile of dirt to these amazing things. So there was always this real interest and curiosity, even from a really young age. When I was a teenager, I pretty much had my heart set on wanting to do something. My elder brother and my dad were useless around the house, and so I think Mum was really happy someone in the family was going to go and do something handy so, things could get done around the house, but I was just drawn to it. So I grew up in Wollongong, and the done thing for all the guys were to go and work in the steelworks because they had a brother or an uncle or, someone they knew, and that was a pretty surefire way to step into apprenticeship after that. I toddled down to the careers advisor's office when it was my turn, and he said, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "Can I go to the steelworks, please?" And he said, "Why do you want to go there?" And I said, "Because I want an apprenticeship." And he said, "Well, go and be a hairdresser." And I kind of went, not what I'm talking about, but there was no inclination for him to even help me with it. It was, here are the places you can choose. Not one of them was construction related. So automatically he just went, "You're not doing that. You're a female. You're going to follow this pathway." So that was my first experience of it being viewed in a negative way, and then it just compounded. I struggled at school through year 11 and 12, so I found school a hard place to be anyway. It wasn't until quite later in my mid-20s I was diagnosed with dyslexia, so it made a lot of sense why I struggled academically at school. Wasn't that I'm stupid, it was just I couldn't learn in the same way. But, my year 11 physics teacher stood up one day, and I remember this vividly, and held up my test paper and officially declared me to be the dumbest person in the room again because I'd failed again in this class. I knew that I would have to make my own way when I finished school. And, I walked out the door in year 12 when you usually get like an ATAR or, your final HSC mark to go into uni or whatever you want to do. I just got a little red dot on the bottom of my certificate, and they give you that when they don't give you a mark because it's so low. And so, I walked out the door, and my ancient history teacher, who was lovely, she was great, but she sort of, as I walked out on one of the last days and you say goodbye to everyone, and she said, I really hope you do well, I just don't know where you're going to end up in life. And it was kind of this
interesting thing to say to a 16-year-old, right?
Yeah, just knew I didn't belong.
Yeah, right.
And so I had no emotional attachment to it.
Which is really horrible because you should feel safe in school, right?
Yeah, no, it was horrible.
And people didn't know what to do with people who couldn't do school, right?
I think with things we now know, like around dyslexia, around autism, around ADHD, all the things that we are now fully aware of, that all was existent then in school, but we didn't have a name for it. So you were the disruptive kid or the disengaged kid. You know, there were other ways of describing, and teachers weren't, you know, well versed in that, so they didn't know how to do it, and there was no other support there. So yeah, I couldn't wait to get out of there. So didn't end up going to the steelworks. Luckily didn't end up at a hairdresser, because can you imagine? Like,
I don't know, your hair's pretty fabulous.
Oh, no, no, that was never going to be it. But I applied for over 150 positions that were advertised for apprentices at the time. I got told every single time, without fail, we don't employ women, we don't want girls on site, you're not going to be strong enough, you won't be able to do the work, you'll be a distraction, why do you even want to work on construction sites, not a place for you, and so on. It was rinse, repeat over 150 times. There was this one guy that I think our family knew, maybe through a sporting thing with my brother or something, and I always refer to him as Barry, just in case anyone who ever listens to me speak knows him. You know when you spot a weakness in someone where you think, oh, if I just needle them enough, I might be able to get through. So I saw that in Barry a bit, and I just kept going back, and I'd turn up to the sites he was on, you know, just relentless. And he turned around one day and he said, fine, you can come and work for 3 months. I'm not paying you. And if you survive the 3 months, then we'll have a chat about an apprenticeship. And I went, done. And I know that's considered modern slavery now, but back then, like I said, rules were different. No one cared. And that was my in. And I went home, said to mum and dad, I'm starting. And they're like, fantastic, you got a job. And I'm like, well, I'm working, I'm just not going to get paid. So they were slightly concerned, but went, your life, your choice, do what you've got to do. Turned up, was super excited, turned up on the first day and went and saw Barry, and he walked over to me, put a shovel in my hand, and he said, I want you to dig a hole. And I said, no problem. How big? What's it for? You know, and he said, don't ask questions, do as you're told, just dig a hole, I'll tell you when you can stop. And I thought, that's fine, I'm going to dig the best hole these guys have ever seen. And I started digging and kept digging, and he didn't come over, and so I thought I'll just keep going. Guys went to smoko, you know, kicking dirt in the hole, having a bit of a laugh at, you know, the girl on site digging this hole. Kept going. Guys went to lunch, same deal. In the afternoon he walked over, and I'm standing in this hole that sort of looks like a grave, and I said, you know, do I stop now? And he said, yeah, you can stop now. He said, fill it in before you go home. And I went, okay. And he said, are you coming back tomorrow? And I said, yes. And he went, all right. So I thought, this is okay. I've heard about this. I know what happens on the sites, you know, a bit of hazing and, you know, the sort of pranks that they pull on apprentices. That's okay. Next day I turned up on site, he gives me a shovel. The next day, a shovel. The next day, it went on for a week. And by the end of the week, came to the realisation that I know what's going on. It's just going to be whether or not I'm going to keep turning up. So that's kind of where the Battle of Wills started, and where I got the very real and quite intense experience of they don't want me here, and they're going to make it as uncomfortable as possible, and they're going to see what it is that makes me break. When you talk about portaloos, it's always a bit of a twitchy subject to me, because I've been that person that's been locked in them repeatedly. Pushed over in them, and it's just as disgusting as you can imagine. That happened quite a bit. At one point they used my lunchbox as a toilet and thought that was hilarious. They'd vandalise my tools, steal my tools, and then obviously all the verbal stuff, so all the things they would say and insinuate and all that sort of stuff, and it was just relentless, and it was just geared around how much could I take and put up with, how much, you know, how willing was I to keep stepping back into it. And so by no means am I the resilient person, you know, who can take all that stuff. I would go home and I'd cry, and I'd say to Mum, I can't do this. And she said, that's all fine. You don't have to put up with this. There was never, no one was forcing me.
What about your mental health? What did that do to your mental health?
Again, I think, you know, in the late 90s, we didn't talk a lot about that, but absolutely had a profound effect. And you know, that sort of relentless harassment and torment, I think I'm still dealing with it today. I've done a lot of work with that.
At what age did you start doing a lot of work though?
Oh, decade afterwards. Yeah. It's one of the things that when you're highly conditioned to feel grateful for even being in the space.
Digging the hole.
digging the
Grateful
hole and being
for digging
allowed
the
to dig the
hole,
hole
yeah.
for free, that you really do get conditioned to that mindset of you should just be grateful. Every single time I'd go home and be like, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'd be sitting there thinking about it. And the one thing that would always pop up is like, but you've just let them win. And I couldn't stomach that.
Did you feel safe though? 'Cause
No.
That's to not feel safe
No.
anywhere, let alone in a workplace.
Yeah, no. I mean, the things they were saying, the things that were being done, no, there was always, always looking over your shoulder. There's always a sense of anxiety. There was always layers upon layers of things that I had to think about before I even kind of did something. I'd been working on this particular site with a facade company for a few weeks, and it was in winter, so it was a bit dark in the morning. You have to get there at 5 a.m. to get a good spot to park. And I was walking in, and this guy was walking along beside me, carrying our tools in and stuff, and he said, just make sure you don't go down to the basements. And I said, no, I haven't been down there, but I thought I might leave some of my stuff there. And he said, don't do that. We won't be able to hear you down there. And it took me a good couple of minutes to realise what he was telling me. And I just kind of stopped dead in my tracks. And I just got really angry all of a sudden because I was already on alert, walking from my car in the dark to the building site in the morning and of an evening, and being hyper aware of that. And now there was another layer added of, well, we don't know and anything could happen there and no one's going to hear you. And I just got really angry and thought, no bloke on this site thinks about that.
Or has to think about the 20 things that you've had to think about just to get to work.
Just to get in the door before I even start working. And culminated in a particularly hard day on this site where trying to navigate using amenities. So there was no female bathroom on the site. I would quite often not go. So I'd dehydrate myself, eat and drink very little during the day so I just wouldn't have to use the bathrooms. Occasionally you do though, right? And so I would have to announce myself walking over to the blocks, and so they were sort of, these blocks of amenities, and they had urinals and cubicles in them. So I'd have to try and announce myself and let them know that I wanted to approach. And I would have to hope that there would be as few people in there as possible. Inevitably, there would always be the same types of guys, if not the same perpetrators, who loved exposing themselves from the urinal when you walked in because that was hilariously funny for them. And when I was actually made it into a free cubicle, then them looking through the crack of the door and, saying these things. There was a particular group of men on this particular job who had taken it upon themselves to really target me and, sort of follow me around the site, making comments and everything else. And on this particular day, they'd seen me go into the cubicle and they decided to come in and tell me that I wasn't allowed to leave unless I'd do all these things for them. So I was 19 years old. I'm in a cubicle. There's men outside the door saying all of these things.
And can we just say that then there was no mobile phone, right?
No mobile phone. No. What was even more confronting and disturbing and probably stuck with me more than the guys saying this stuff was the guys who were coming in using the other cubicles around me in the urinals, who walked in and did whatever they needed to do and left and didn't say a word. That was probably worse for me in terms of a betrayal. This went on for about 40 or so minutes. I think I pretty much had emotional breakdown going, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore. If the industry doesn't want me, I don't want to be here. I've just got to get myself out of this cubicle and then that's it. I'm not coming back. There was this big kerfuffle and then some bit of banging and crashing and a lot of yelling. And then I heard this guy turn around and say, Joe, you can come out now, it's fine. And I sort of cracked open the door and there was this guy standing out there, red hair, probably about my height, so pretty short. And he was the site manager. And I'd seen him around and never had really much interaction with him. And he said, you can come out. He said, it's completely fine. He goes, those guys aren't going to be here anymore. And he just said, I'm so sorry this has been happening. I didn't know and I should have known. And he said, can you come and have a chat in the office? Let's talk about how we're going to fix this. So I was a mess, as you can imagine. But he, we sat in his side office and got me a cup of coffee and we started talking about things and he said, tell me what's been going on. And so I just poured out all this sort of stuff and he said, all right, we're going to deal with this. And that was the first man out of hundreds of men that I'm in contact with in the industry who stood up for me. So I'm, 2+ years into the industry by this point, have come across all this behaviour and that's the first who says, no, this is not okay.
The real man.
Yeah. And that was an absolute turning point for me.
What was his name?
His name's Jeff. He's still one of my best friends. I call him Uncle Jeff.
Right.
He checks in with me all the time. He's getting near to retirement now.
And he changed your life, right?
He absolutely. I was going to walk out the door, and I would never have come back. And he actually said, can I convince you to stay, and I promise you things will change. And I said, I'll give it one more go, but I think I'm done. And things did change after that. They absolutely did change that entire site in terms of the behaviour change, because he set the standard of what was
bloody
okay.
Legend, Jeff.
A bloody legend. But hashtag be like Jeff. I'm going to get bumper stickers made. But and he gave this really simple speech to stop the site, and he got everybody in, a couple of hundred people. And he said, I'm going to make this real simple. At the end of the day, we're all people who are here to do the job, and we've got to look after each other. And if you don't like that and don't want to play by those rules, there's the gate. See you later. He didn't talk about gender. He didn't single me out as having to have special treatment. He didn't do anything other than just really relay it in the most simplistic terms of, we're just people to do a job. Let's just look after each other. I did have to tell Jeff to get a sanitary bin.
Yeah, right.
Again, massive turning point for me in my career. And so Jeff is the first, but he wasn't the only one, because it's not like as my career trajectory changed and, things moved on and I started to sort of climb the ladder, so to speak. There was always the same type of mentality and mindset of, you don't belong here. You're not good enough, why do you need special treatment? It's like, it's not special, it's the same, but okay. That equality, that equity, just because we need different things doesn't mean it's a special treatment. But all of those things have continued for 30 years. Yes, some things have changed for the better. Yes, we're able to have more open conversations about the challenges women face, but they have certainly not disappeared. They are not gone.
That's a lot to take in, but I really want to unpack a little bit about menstruation for you. How old were you when you got your first period?
15.
That's a bit older though, right?
Yep.
I think the average is 12.
In our friendship group, I think I was one of the last actually. Yeah. And straight away it was hard to manage. So always heavy, painful, prone to flooding, just generally hard to manage. And obviously working on a construction site with very little amenity and a physical job. I would be up on a scaffold, installing windows or cladding, and all of a sudden stop and be like, guys, I'll be right back. By the time I got down to the bottom of the scaffold, my pants would be drenched.
Yeah.
And so I always had to have changes of clothes. I would always have a spare shirt in my tool bucket to wrap around myself. I always wore really dark pants. Again, layers of things that men never think about, never have to. Managing around not having sanitary bins, managing when, hey, all of a sudden I thought I had something in my pocket and I don't. So now I'm using masses of toilet paper, just all of these things that I think every woman in the same situation has done. It was really difficult. There were days where I was in extreme pain, but would never have had the conversation around why I would need a day off.
And you don't seem like the sort of person who'd take a sick day either, right?
Oh, no, I'd have to be pretty sick.
Yeah.
It just wasn't done.
Did you ever have a conversation around your periods to any of your bosses in construction?
Never. It was always, so if on the very odd occasion it was so severe that I literally couldn't get out of bed, it was I had the flu. Yeah. It was always something else, or I've got some other injury that was preventing me to do stuff. I mean, I remember when I was hobbling around on site, almost doubled over in pain, and the guys said, "Did you have a fall or did you hurt yourself?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I've just strained my back," because I was bent over and just agonising pain. From a personal level too, I wasn't going seeking help from doctors. I was just dealing with this silently. So silence from an employment perspective, silence from a personal perspective. But eventually it got to the point where I was speaking to a GP and they said, look, we'll refer you to a gynecologist and we need to have a look at this because it isn't normal.
How old were you then?
I would have been around 23.
But even back in our day, you didn't go to a gynecologist unless you were having a baby.
Yeah.
You didn't go, right? It just wasn't a thing. No one discussed periods in the first place.
Yeah.
Your doctor referred you to a gynecologist?
Yeah, and I think I actually ended up going to the GP because I passed out on site. and I had severe anemia.
You weren't up on scaffolding though.
And again, no, they thought I'd hit my head and thought that was the reason why, and I just kind of went along with that story. So it just enabled me to get off site and see a doctor. The first gynecologist I saw was a male gynecologist, and I kid you not, he turned around and said, maybe if you have a baby, it'll fix the problem. When I eventually went through several gynecologists, and I think I went through about 9 different ones because they were basically experimenting, trying to work out what it was. So I'd get these tests, I would have, various procedures done. And eventually and thankfully, I was referred to a professor who has long since retired now from Uni in New South Wales. And he was one of the foremost experts at the time around women's reproductive health. And he was one of the first people who actually started looking at endometriosis as a serious issue for women. So it was quite groundbreaking at that time. By that time, I was creeping up to the age of 30 when I finally got referred to him, and I was in all sorts. The anemia, the other complications I was having. I was sick all the time, barely really functioning in terms of energy levels and other things. I was bleeding most days. So it was very rare for me to have a day where I didn't have an active period.
Wow.
And so my body was just in this complete overdrive and everything else.
Also, do the numbers. You started this at 23 and you're talking about being 30.
Yeah. He basically was very, very blunt and said he'd done a few tests, and he came back and he said, you have a number of things going on. You've got extreme and severe endometriosis and calcification of your reproductive organs from your uterus through to your ovaries and everywhere else, which is also latched onto other things. We can deal with that. What we can't deal with is the fact that you have a deformed uterus, which has happened at birth. And he said you would never be able to have children. I think it was either 2 weeks after or 2 weeks before my 30th birthday. And he just said that. And so I just kind of sat there and went, this is a lot to take in, and has basically changed my whole perception of what my life might look like in the future.
And you were by yourself when you heard that information? I mean, that's a lot to take in, right?
Yeah. So he said, I want to do this straight away. What are your options? And straight away my mind went, how do I get time off work for this? I'm not going to tell them this. I can't have this conversation. And so he basically gave me a 2-week window and said, I really need to get you in as soon as possible. I made up a story to my boss that I had some viral, infection or something going on to get the initial upfront time off. So complete lie, and went in for this major surgery. Realised then as we went through all of the discussion about the surgery itself that I'd be, off my feet for 6 weeks. I wouldn't be driving. And that created no end of anxiety for me to go, how am I going to navigate this with my job? And so, again, it was just lies upon lies upon lies of, I've got this issue or that issue. And look, it was confronting on some other levels too. So it was, you can't have children, and we're fully taking away the ability for that. And it's not...
Even if you never wanted to, when someone takes away your choice,
it was that. It was also female identity. So I had recently, sort of come to the, acceptance within myself that, I was attracted to women and men. And so I felt that all of a sudden I was being pushed into a stereotype or demographic where there was going to be a lack of female identity because this was happening to me. And again, the question mark over, can I even continue in this industry with what's going on? And the recovery was a lot harder than I thought. I just felt so much better than I had previously. It was life-changing.
Yeah. And in our Bloody Big survey, we found out that more than 62% of women in Australia have diagnosed low iron. And that effect on a person's brain and their body function is phenomenal. Now, if you can't afford period products, you probably can't afford iron tablets and iron infusions, right? So what as a society are we doing to address that it's a major problem in Australia, and it's just something, again, nobody talks about. And women just go, oh, well, it's just part of being a woman. It's not.
Well, you can't afford iron tablets, but if there's a distinct issue there also, you probably can't afford a gynecologist.
That's right.
So how many women are walking around carrying this undiagnosed and being in the same unrelenting agony that I was.
7 years
without
before
getting
you got a
help.
diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
That's 7 years of you not living your best life in those really key parts of your life too.
Yeah.
What is Build Like a Girl?
Build Like a Girl is a registered not-for-profit charity, started in 2020, and it was built out of pure rage. So I like to channel the emotion into something positive. It was always really interesting growing up. The one thing my mum always said to me is you have two choices in life. You can whinge and complain about something and do something to fix it, or shut up. So that was our rule of life. And I found as I moved through the construction industry and got to a point, so I'd been appointed as the general manager of Kane Constructions, $1 billion company a year nationally. So I was the only female general manager of a company that size, generated a lot of interest from a lot of other women, and I just got inundated on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook Messenger and the like, of other women saying, how have you survived and how have you gotten to this point? Because there's no place for me here. The dropout rate for first-year female apprentices is 72%, all because of culture. Any other workplace that they're going to go to in any other industry, they'll walk into a female bathroom that has female sanitary products and, hopefully, some form of period product on offer, or at least nearby and accessible. Construction doesn't offer that. So why would they stay? I sat at my kitchen table one weekend and thought, I've got to create something. I don't know what it is, but I've got to create something where we can just come and we can share these stories and we can get the help we need and just create that network and community. And so that was Build Like a Girl. I'm scratching around on paper and spent the entire weekend. My partner's walking past, having a look and then wandering off again, and got some friends to help, set up all of the legalities and the constitution and board and all of those things that we need. But it was really grassroots around, we're just here, and if you've got a question or you need help, and all of a sudden the floodgates opened, and young women leaving school going, I've applied for all these apprenticeships and no one will give me a job. So I was like, okay, we'll use our network, so we'll help you find a job. Women who are in the job going, I can't handle this, I can't handle what the guys are doing. And it's like, nope, stop, let's fix this. Let's either address, that site, or let's get you into a better place with the people that we know. And so we have a really high employment success rate, around 78% for all of the people who go through our employment programs to enter a trade or a long-term construction role. I get all these lovely cards from them whenever we finish, and I had one recently for our program in December from one of the young ladies, and she wrote a whole bunch of stuff in there, but she said, you're the first person who's ever believed in me.
You became her Jeff. Full circle.
It is, and it's really powerful work. And this well. It's in those days where you feel like you can't wake up again and do this.
And from that, the building industry has changed?
Building industry, we're finding more and more that companies recognise the need to have a diverse workforce.
And pick them up in grade 10. There's all
Correct.
those people who don't have what is meant to fit the normal in education, right?
Yep.
And they're the boys and the girls who are either naughty or disengaged. Engage them, give them something to be passionate about, right?
Yep.
But start them that they're already in our education system, right?
Yeah. And there's a place for everyone in construction.
Absolutely.
And we
There's
know
a place
that,
for everybody everywhere, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's an incredibly viable career. But if we're not going to seriously look at this and just level that playing field in really, really simple ways, keep losing all of these women who are super keen on day one, like I was, here's the shovel, here's no toilet, here's no sanitary products. It's literally the same thing happening to these women today.
For less than $1,000, you could get a sanitary bin, a sign, and provision of period products.
And have a fantastic female apprentice who is going to stay there and become qualified and be an asset to your business. I mean, it is the best return on investment I reckon you could possibly have.
Absolutely. We've been talking for a while about a new campaign called Building Bloody Change. Tell me what you're most excited about for that.
I'm most excited about the fact that it can be so far-reaching in terms of bringing the conversation to the forefront and doing it in such a way that you can't hide from it anymore. It's really now is the time when we have spoken about all of those things that need to change in the industry, how desperate we are for people. This is the catalyst really for women in the industry to feel seen and heard and acknowledged. And like we said, just to provide that little bit of equity that has been missing for generations, to now bring this into the industry is really going to be one of probably the most innovative things I think that we've seen in the past few years in terms of retaining people and seeing more people want to join the industry. So, I just think that it's going to change the game nationally in every single business in construction.
We had a meeting last year and you brought together all of the people who are working in construction who can bring about this great change. When we do something, we don't just at Share the Dignity go, oh, this is a great idea. We literally have pulled together this focus group to be able to look at how do we have better outcomes for women and girls in Australia.
Yeah, and I think for me, when I, reached out and we started talking about, the challenges construction face and the work that you do, you're sort of the foremost voice in this. And even though it's a challenge in community and society and all of the other industry sectors, it's a way for all of us as organisations who represent and advocate for women and non-binary people to step up and elevate your work and amplify your work for our industry. And so it's really important for us to stand shoulder to shoulder and send the same strong message around the work Share the Dignity does and why it is so important in construction to shine the light on this conversation because, as we've spoken about earlier, I was too scared to have this conversation years ago. It's time to have the conversation now.
So let's build bloody change.
Let's build bloody change because it's about bloody time.
Absolutely.